Well, thank you, Chairman Waters. I am always willing to be your wingman on this issue. Maxine Waters has been about fairness and equity in our country for 40 years, and she has a record and legacy of support, and she made clear this was not just about CDFIs, but about MDIs, minority-owned institutions, particularly black-owned institutions. We lost most of those black banks during the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Thank you, Vice President Harris, for inviting me. Vice President Harris was then Senator Harris. She and Cory Booker and Chuck Schumer and I put together this bill, Jobs and Neighborhood Investment Act. As Senator Harris mentioned, we actually had strong Republican support. Mike Crapo, the then chair of the Banking Committee, and about a half dozen other Republican senators joined in this effort. Secretary Yellen, it's always great to be with you, and you have made sure that this idea is now being implemented in a way that's fair and appropriate. And Secretary Yellen's comments, she made mention of the fact I used to be a venture capitalist. The numbers are even worse. The idea that 70% of VC money went to 4 communities. If you parse that even more and look at how many went to people of color, less than 5%. If you then become more magnanimous and throw in all women, the number only goes up to about 10%. And that's the kind of capital that seeds the growth of small business. And Lisa, it's been a real pleasure to get to know you and the great work that you do with OFN Network. This is an industry and a cause whose time has come. We all know that COVID disproportionately hit communities of color. And others have already mentioned this. What it really hit as well were black and brown businesses. It's been reported in 2020, we lost 440,000 black-owned businesses. Close to a third of Latino businesses had to close their doors for at least part of the time. And unfortunately, as the Secretary acknowledged, and I think the Vice President acknowledged, when the government first started to set up its traditional relief programs, the PPP program, really well-intentioned. But after the first wave of money went out, we realized, gosh, black and brown businesses aren't getting their fair share. Women-owned businesses aren't getting their fair share. Oftentimes, rural-owned businesses weren't getting their fair share. The reason was not a design flaw, but because we put most of this capital as a delivery mechanism through traditional banks, and particularly businesses of color, they didn't have traditional banking relationships. They had bootstrapped up their businesses in the most classic American success story way, but then when it came time to say, the federal government's got resources for you, they didn't have that long-term established banking relationship, so they got left out. In later rounds, we did a little better, but Senator Harris, Chairman Waters, Vice President Harris, we came together and said, we need to not just provide short-term relief. We need to start looking at structural relief in terms of access to capital. A lot more people get access to capital who look like me than look like the balance of the speakers up here. And that's just not fair. It's just not right. In a country that's majority women and about 35% people of color, we are not going to succeed in this country unless everyone has access to capital. So we came up with the Jobs and Neighborhood Investment Act. And as Chair Waters knows, and then Senator Harris knows, it was a windy path to get here. People kept saying, what's that $12 billion for? Because candidly, a lot of folks outside the financial industry don't understand what CDFIs do. They don't understand that our MDIs have been decimated. So very quickly, the announcement today of the first round of grants. This program's been broken into 2 initiatives. $3 billion will go in direct grants to these organizations. The first $1.25 billion will go out with the Secretary's announcement. $1.75 billion will come out later in the year. And again, Chair Waters ought to get recognized to make sure that we did a little extra in there for black-owned minority depository institutions. That's really exciting. That's about 10x what the government gives out in the CDFI fund on a normal basis, so substantial. But where the real game changer will come is there's also $9 billion that will be distributed in a direct, what's called Tier 1 capital into these institutions. That $9 billion on a traditional banking relationship can be leveraged 10 to 1. That'll mean $90 billion of additional lending to communities who are challenged. By definition, the CDFI has to lend at least 60% to low and moderate income communities. So this is first time in a long time the federal government is literally putting its money where its mouth is in terms of support for minority businesses, women-owned businesses, businesses that not had a fair shake. One of the things I've been working with the Vice President on and folks at the Treasury Department on is I think this is a great first step, but this should not be enough. We need to challenge our major institutions, the CDFI banks. They have made a lot of press releases recently, but we need to make sure they actually put real capital up. We need to have a program similar to encourage community banks to lend to women-owned and minority-owned businesses and rural-owned businesses. We need to make sure that corporate America, and Lisa's been talking about this, who say they want to do things to deal with racial inequity in this country, actually put real capital behind. We, with the federal government, have taken a giant step forward with this. It is due to the leadership of these incredible women behind me. I'm happy to be part of the team, and as I said, Maxine, anytime you need a wingman, sign me up. Thank you all so much.
Well done. I'm following you.
Okay.